Mine should be real fast. I only have about 80 slides, and I'll take about 30 seconds for each one, so we'll be out of here in no time. No, actually, mine should be real fast. For the southern part of this survey, the only storm I did was the one through Tellico Plains. But part of what I did was we were trying to see if we had a continuous track from that McMinn County into Tellico Plains. So we actually drove down, I guess it's 411, or what's that road that runs down there? And you can see when you drive down there, if you're heading south off on your left-hand side, you see that high ridge sits about 2,000 feet high. It was clear as can be, the path going up the side of that. But what was interesting was, if you looked right at the ridge line, and I have a picture here, but if you looked right at the ridge line, it didn't seem like there was as much tree damage as there was going up the side of the hill. So we had that going there, and then in order to survey the other side, you basically had to go fairly far north, come around, and then come down. There's not a lot of good roads in here to get up in there, but we spent probably 3 or 4 hours trying to get as close to where we saw it end over here and couldn't find anything. It had truly, like George said, once it reached that ridge top, it seemed like it lifted. And then the next thing we saw was when they started to report the tornado in Tellico Plain. But that's one of the photos of the ridge line. The end of it is somewhere right over in here. It kind of goes from this direction here up into there, and you can see once you got to the other side too, it's like a plateau up there. It sits around 1,800 to 2,000 feet, probably for a few miles north and south there, but not much damage at all that can be seen from the other side. So from there, I'll talk about the Tellico Plains system. 14.9 mile path, 12 miles of which was through heavily forested area, which we did our best to traverse. We did not get any pictures from them, but they did fly it, and they did give us points along here, and that's what helped us to determine the end point of that. So the few photos I have are going to be focused down in here. And the interesting thing that I thought, I'd heard it, but I think I saw it firsthand here, was the vorticity stretching as it comes down a hill. It seemed to intensify, and I'll show you what I mean by that here in a moment. This is the start of the path. It's over in here, very minimal damage as across the, I guess that's 68. And then this is the part of town that really started to see damage. I'd say you're looking at best moderate EF1 damage. Let me go back here. Then the path kind of leaves town, hits this ridge here, which is close. Not a lot of damage on this side of that little hilltop here, but then as it pushed down into I guess the flood basin, the worst damage was right in here at the KOA campground. I don't know if anybody's been down to that KOA campground down there, but basically a lot of small cabins and one 2-story, probably about 2,000 square foot like main lodge, and I'll show you a picture of what was left of it. Very well constructed. But I think that the transition from this ridge down into that floodplain, it actually intensified quite well, because the damage we saw down in there was pretty good. And then path actually looked like it started to widen as it started to come out of the floodplain. And I have pictures of a home up here that the day we surveyed, George has shown you tons of pictures of where the trees are falling all around. They couldn't get up in there with a vehicle. The people had to walk in and out. And we were there 2 days after the event, and they still hadn't been able to clear enough in there. This is that stretch from that ridge that I said down into the floodplain. There's the river there, and there's the campground. And I guess it's not showing up on the slide here, but this is an elevation profile, and it's roughly, what, 1,200 to 800 feet. It's about a 400-foot drop in 0.2 of a mile. And like I said, once you saw it come to near the road here, the damage started to get pretty good. A lot of sheared off trees. Didn't see much in here, but the campground, and in particular the main lodge, it completely destroyed it. And then, like I said, this little house on the hill was the last decent structure we had before it started to, most of its path, the remainder of its path was in through the woods. These are the two photos from the town down here. You can see below the picture. In the town, like I said before, EF1 at best. The worst damage was with the little trailer park that sat on a hill near the center part of the town, and trailers overturned, completely destroyed, nothing strapped down. So at best you're looking EF1, maybe even argue that you had high EF0 in some areas there. The one structure that was not a trailer that was extensively damaged was a home, but it was almost like the frame of the house was just set down on the cinder blocks, not even strapped to it at all. So wind easily got up underneath that, and you can see from the photo there was nothing holding it down except I think they laid block and then put a 2x4 over the top of it, and but that was what we saw in town. Next, like I said, climbed up on that 1,200-foot ridge there, and then 400 feet drop in elevation, less than 0.2 of a mile, gets you to the campground. That's what's left of the two-story main. It was their supply store, and it's where folks checked in to go to the campground. That's just one wall. That's the only wall left. 3 walls completely destroyed. That wall left standing. Most of this is probably about 400 to 500 yards that way. I guess that way, from your left to your right, strewn out in there. I do have, you can see here a little bit of the frame that held, and I have a photo, yeah, of where they had some 2x6s laid down along the front part, the entryway. It ripped up the 2x6s, left the bolts in the ground, completely lost its integrity, and it did have bolts, and those bolts were prevalent throughout the 3 sides that we saw exposed. The other thing I found interesting, it didn't give you the EF2, the 130 mile an hour that we got for it, but I found it interesting was this is one of those big sheds, you know, where you keep lawn equipment or you know, dozers or little bobcats and stuff. It lifted the entire thing up, and 2 of the 4 stanchions that were holding it, you can tell where they actually had cut it when they put it in there, it seemed, and then poured the concrete for the corners. But it actually pulled those up, and that pad there, it's probably, I don't know, maybe 10 yards away. That's where it came from, was over in there. I just found that interesting that even though I know it was cut and poured, that it still pulled that whole block, and that about 10 yards further away from it. This is that last one I was telling you, the house up on the hill there, you can see in the upper right. This goes back up the hill, and I don't have the elevation data on it, but it starts a pretty decent climb. And like I said, to travel by vehicle, it was still blocked off that day because on the entry side, a lot of big trees still falling, a lot of debris still down. As a matter of fact, I think they're still working on power. From this side, it doesn't look that bad, but the Monroe County Emergency Manager had been up there, and the back side that we can't see, the side that would have been, I guess, north of here, the north corner, there's nothing there, and you can kind of tell that the roof is totally collapsed on that side. And he said the back side of this roof, sections of it had lifted up, and you can see here there's no eaves there. That back section had lifted off. So this doesn't look as bad, but the back side of it is worse than this. And I think, yeah, I think that was it. I mean, after that, it was 12 miles up into the woods, trying to keep an eye on it. And the one thing I did find interesting was, as it came down that hill, it seemed like the damage, the width of it had constricted, intensity increased, and then as it went back up into the woods, The opposite seemed to have happened. You had tree damage, you had substantial tree damage, and it looked like the width of the system actually got wider as it continued its way up there, which I thought was interesting. Anyhow, that's all I got.